Hello, everybody. Bob Oxley here. It's time for tips, topics, issues, and positions. And today's topic, we're going to be continuing on to take a look at the U.S. government policy. And it's my pleasure to welcome back Professor Joe Green and Dr. Chip Mcleod, who is the chair of the History and Political Science Department at Dixie State University. Welcome back, gentlemen.
We're back.
We're back. Bob. It's been 30 days, and we're kind of like analyzing what's going on with the Trump administration as well as with Congress, and talk about a number of issues. And where we left off, we were wondering about this thing called the wall between Mexico and the United States, and we saw a government shutdown, which we discussed previously. Then we are looking at what President Trump was going to do, and then we had a vote again recently in Congress, both the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate sent a bill to the president for signature about we're not going to do the wall. So can you pick up from there and just give me your opinions, comments, anything to do with the wall?
In the legislation that ended the shutdown, the Congress funded, what was it, $3 billion for the wall. The president didn't think that was enough, and so he said he was going to declare an emergency and redirect funds that Congress either hadn't allocated or that he was permitted by law to reallocate to building the wall and getting the amount that he could use. He thought maybe up to $8 billion instead of the $3 billion that he was going to do. But to do that, he had to declare an emergency. And Congress has in the way they wrote that law, they can tell the president, no, that's not an emergency. You can't spend that money if they pass a law saying that. Congress, the House easily passed the law because it's run by the Democrats. The Senate turned out to easily pass the law, too, because 12 Republicans, even though they have a majority, 12 Republicans said, no, you can't do this. And but the president can veto it, so he's going to do his emergency.
Got it. So now we are at the point whereby, did the president veto this then?
Yes.
Okay, he's vetoed it, so where does it go from here? What happens? Anybody?
He builds the wall.
He's going to build the wall?
Yes.
Something that maybe looks like a wall, or that somebody he can convince his constituents, his supporters, is a wall.
Well, I mean, where's the funds coming from the wall? If Congress, they have the power of the purse, so where's the money coming from for this $8 billion?
Some money that Congress allocates doesn't have an exact line item. It's at the discretion of the secretary of whichever department or the commission, whatever government agency that is looking at. And using that discretion, the president is the ultimate manager of the federal government. It looked like he could get, I think it was $2 or $3 billion without a hassle, just by redirecting those discretionary
Most
funds.
of it was coming from the let's call it undesignated / soft money from the Department of Defense.
Whoops.
That can be used for that sort of thing and has been in the past. And if nobody says no, then he can have the money for a project like this.
Wow. But
that money generally is understood by the congressman. It's going to my district.
Here we go.
And I thought the defense stuff, correct me, I may be wrong, I thought the stuff from defense that Trump can't arbitrarily just take it. And so they can challenge that in court, and that's what the issue is about. He could have gotten almost as much as he wanted through discretionary stuff without declaring an emergency. But by declaring an emergency, he's made it a campaign issue, which is what he wants.
Okay.
That's at least my understanding of the reasoning behind doing what he did.
Well, and he's looking for who supports it and who doesn't, which is purely political. And there could be some. I don't recall that anybody's written the check for the money he needs yet. It's not a done deal. They haven't, if you will, pulled the trigger on it. But he seems to be on the seems to be in control right now.
What about there? You said there was 12 Republicans that voted against the emergency declaration, voted against the president.
Yeah, both Utah senators voted against it.
Wow. Okay. So, can we override vetoes? Does he see that, or is there enough in there to override a veto if the president?
You'd have to count heads. I mean, you need 2/3 from both parts of the federal legislature, and I don't know if they have that.
I can't remember how many Republicans in the House voted for the bill. That is to tell the president he can't do it. There were some, but there aren't nearly enough in the House to override
the Senate. You mean?
Well, the House. I don't think they could override it in the House, and I don't think there's enough in the. If they got 12, but that's not enough to get 2.
No, all told, when you do the veto, the 2/3 veto math, it doesn't appear that they're going to be able to override his veto.
Wow. He's like you said, he's safe. He feels, and he's also taking names down who voted against him from the Republican Party.
Very Trumpian.
Now, Speaker Pelosi has noted the law allows the Congress in this situation to bring the bill up again every 6 months if they want. So we're going to go through this vote again, at least in the House, because the Democrats like this as an issue too for their base, the people who don't like Mr. Trump and will vote for the Democrats. So,
and we probably don't need to remind your listeners that this was one of the top 2 things Trump promised as he campaigned.
Absolutely.
He's going to wreck Obamacare and build that wall.
That's it. Those are the 2. You see that. Go back historically. Take a look at all those clips. Those 2 issues were brought up over and over and over again. So go ahead.
The stuff that the emergency declaration, the money that Trump gets from that, probably won't get to spend it because it's probably going to be stopped by the courts. The lawsuits have been filed. And the judges are doing whatever the judges do, but there will be a ruling and he won't be able to spend it until they defend it in court. So that's why the president said when it came out, I've talked to all the constitutional lawyers and they say that it's legal. He didn't talk to all the constitutional lawyers. There's a whole bunch who don't think it's legal, but the ones he talked to
well, and we could be at the election easily before anything has transpired of any concrete nature, and it'll be interesting to see what kind of election issue it becomes then.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this quasi-wall that we're talking about now. Is it – I mean, we've already talked it at length in the previous 2 times you've been on here in the studio talking about this, and as far as resolving any type of an immigration problem, it doesn't seem to be doing that, but there's a lot of other issues now that's being addressed as far as the Supreme Court this last week, and a vote of 5-4 said that if a immigrant crossed in requested asylum and they had a criminal record, that they could be incarcerated indefinitely. Is that I mean, that fits right along with the headlines were the day after the vote was taken by the Supreme Court that it was a Trump victory. Is that? Do you have any comments on that at all?
Maybe on paper, but I'm hard pressed to understand how you could implement that in any functional way. I mean, people like that who support Trump, but Supreme Court rulings and then making them into again functional reality down here on the ground. How many cases can we pick and talk about where that's been very difficult?
Got it. Some other things that have come up, I'm just throwing things out at you as I usually do to you 2 gentlemen. Here's one. The president keeps attacking via Twitter Senator John McCain. How do you feel about that? And you always give me your honest opinion, so that's what I'm after.
Well, this is old sort of news commentary, quippage, if you will, for you 2 gentlemen. But again, basically parroting what I heard one fairly well-known thinker, commentator, and whatnot mention yesterday. George Will. I thought it was funny. He's a pretty deep thinker, and among other things, I don't know where this thread's going to take us, but he described Donald Trump as someone who was, his words, not mine, pathologically insecure. And where do you want to start? It was very. This could be serious or not so serious on many different levels, but day one, with my inaugural turnout's bigger than yours, and here we go. He if you're asking for something like a quasi-candid opinion, I'm not real sure why he doesn't understand that in terms of just human decency, it's kind of distasteful.
Yeah. He gave in a speech a couple of days ago, a military-oriented group that had a military contract, and he started in thanking them for all the work they do and everything else, and he went right into the anti-McCain rhetoric.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of military people sitting in the audience and veterans sitting in the audience, and there was dead silence. And this is his base, some of his base people. They had it on film that they were just looking at each other, and they felt very, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, he really stepped on his message that day. He was celebrating the economy. It's growing.
Yes.
Last year it grew at 3%. It hadn't grown for 3% for 10 years. And he has a message, and if he's going to win re-election, that's going to be the key to his message. Is I said I would get the economy going, and the economy's going. But that wasn't the news cycle. The news cycle was the John McCain stuff.
Yeah.
Now, he's really angry about the investigation that's been going on that Mr. Mueller is running. And maybe what in the back of his mind, the thing that's going on here is it was revealed. The reason all this started is it was revealed that the Russian dossier that the Mrs. Clinton and the Democratic National Committee paid for and got found ways through some people that they were associated with to get it to the FBI and the Justice Department, and the Justice Department to act on it, to open an investigation. It turns out that dossier was distributed. One of the people distributing it all over town, all over Washington, was John McCain's chief of staff. And so Mr. Trump's view, I think, was John McCain stabbed me in the back. He came in and asked for my endorsement when he was running, and then he stabs me in the back by passing around this dossier. I think I heard him interviewed say he didn't tell me about it. He just gave it to the press,
yeah.
sort of thing. So he's really angry.
Yeah, he's still angry at him as well over his no vote on Obamacare. And
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I remember he recently, in the last 24 hours, brought that up again.
That was the vote that determined whether they repealed it or whether they didn't.
Yeah.
One vote.
But yeah, he again, there are policies. There's what he does on the job that is directly tied to his being president, and then there's the image he projects as the chief executive of the United States. And frankly, when he started, I hope he realizes that McCain didn't fly his plane he was shot down. He didn't do that on purpose, and he was captured and to the best of my understanding, is of military heroism. The man's a real live military hero, and
Yeah.
did 5.5 years in a POW camp and on.
And was going to be released because his dad was an admiral and
Exactly.
refused, stayed 3 or 4 extra
To
years.
stay with his men. He stayed in the Hanoi Hilton
And
to
it's
be with his men.
Really, it's just hard to tell because, again, I don't think anybody with us today is a mental health professional, but everybody wants to weigh in on that aspect of Trump's personality, but he just can't, for some reason, seem to stop doing that. And anybody and everybody who comes up and seems to loom somehow larger in terms of a personage or accomplishments or what have you, his approach to leveling the playing field just seems to dismiss them and come up with these rants about them. And I think Joe was exactly right. He really should tout his accomplishments, and he'd do well to cut that out, I think. But anyway.
Wow.
So far, he and his people have not contacted Dr. Mcleod or I as their political advisors. So.
Well, I don't think he's listening to too many people right there on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So I don't think we're in the running as consultants.
No, we're not.
I think he's got Utah labeled there after the Lee and Romney voted against him.
He may be taking names.
Yeah, might be that case. I know he's got 12 on that list right now. So
I think he's still going to win Utah in 2016. So
new version of 12 Angry Men, Women, whatever.
Yeah,
who knows?
2020 is just around the corner, so we'll see what happens. I've got something else that's just come up in the last 24 hours because he always keeps us going, full of information here. He just notified the Israeli government that they're going to get the property back from the Palestinians. It's nice that the United States, he represents the United States government, can tell them that you're going to get the property back and get rid of the Palestinians, which I understand some of the response coming out of Moscow already was, well, if you can do it, we can do it. Any comment on that?
The Golan Heights, I presume you're talking about.
Yeah. That was territory that Israel conquered in the 1967.
67. The 6 Day War.
The 6 Day War. They conquered the West Bank. They conquered Sinai, and Golan Heights is the part they haven't surrendered because it's strategically. The Syrians who used to control it could look down on their agricultural areas and some of their cities and fire artillery and so on, so strategically. But there's a United Nations resolution that prohibits anybody from annexing territory that they've taken in military action. That the United States has, every president of the United States since that resolution, I can't remember how old it is, has always used that to criticize people when other nations when they invade. Russia's been the main one, so that's why Putin can gloat a little bit because he violated the technical terms of the United Nations resolution when he went into the Crimea and took it over. Okay. So now, evidently, we don't agree with the United Nations resolution anymore, which was seems to me, in international affairs, to be a really good way to run your affairs, a precedent that says, hey, civilized nations don't do this, and we can criticize Russia or we could criticize somebody else if they go into another country, and now we can't.
Well,
I think it's worth mentioning as well that so like our president, he's very much trading on what he regards as his very good personal relationship with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes,
that's part of it. I don't know whether he has thought much about what this is going to mean, but I think he's pretty much tapped into good personal relations with the man at the top, which I think we all understand is pretty important to him, and all of his dealings at home and internationally.
Well, in response, the leader of Israel came out and had a picture of him and Trump standing by each other, and he thanked the president. Pompeo.
Yeah.
Had a picture together. I think it was with Trump. And
they were. Pompeo was in Israel when this happened.
Right. But I'm just saying there's a picture, actually a physical picture he's put out on the air with the President of the United States. Thank you, Mr. President, for making this decision that's favorable to Israel. The question I've got is, and maybe this I'm thinking about Mueller, but I'm thinking on the other side, on the Israeli side. I think that the leader of Israel is currently under an investigation himself in his own country in Israel for corruption.
And he's in a run for, they're in an election. The election's in a couple of weeks.
Got it.
And Netanyahu has been, charged with corruption, literally charged. He's going to evidently have to have a trial. I don't know how that works if he's the leader in Israel, but it's a close election as a result. Normally, Netanyahu would be way ahead because he's strong on security, and that's what the Israelis are worried about right now. But to have Trump come and give his permission to take over the Golan Heights is, I think, just an out-and-out attempt to change
the politics, the election,
influence the election.
Yeah, sure.
So we don't like other people influencing our election, but it's okay if we do.
It's okay if we do that.
No, and again, that just once again the underpinning of what Trump seems to think is so important that allows him to lead, govern, do whatever he wants to do or thinks is best. His personal relationships with these people and personal loyalty, unlike anything we've seen in quite some time in a president.
Yeah, and if we switch gears, we go from Israel down to Venezuela. There's another where the president blatantly has come out and said the current president, or I don't recognize him as the current president, even though he was elected by the people, and now he's evolved from a socialist into a dictator. But this new young fellow, we're going to back him.
The Venezuelan Constitution has a provision that says if somehow if there are problems in an election, so you're not sure who the president is, that the presidency devolves to the leader of the assembly, the leader of the parliament. And probably working through back channels, the Trump administration got virtually every one of the South American countries to declare that the last election, the one Maduro won, which was it was not a legitimate election. Parties were suppressed. It happens all over the world, but it clearly wasn't. But they all now are backing this leader of the parliament, this young guy. What's his name?
I'm trying to remember now.
Me too.
Not coming to me.
Starts with a G. Anyway, and then he got the Europeans, we think. Maybe they did it on their own. So virtually all of the free world, South America, Europe, Japan, have said, no, this is the real leader. And that allowed us to also claim that he's the real leader and start slapping sanctions in order to get rid of the Maduro government.
Sort of a free world acclamation that they need to do something different in their country.
Right, and what they have done, Venezuelans are in a hopeless situation. Not enough food, not enough medical supplies. Those that have crossed the line, we, the U.S., have sent down aid, and it's sitting on the border between Colombia and Venezuela, being blocked.
Yeah, Brazil has a bunch on its border. Colombia does.
Sad situation again.
It could destabilize Colombia. The reason we're worried is because we don't want that area destabilized because they grow a lot of drugs there, and without relatively strong governments, it's harder to control the drugs. So
it's another messy situation.
Anarchy is not an option, I think, is what the State Department's thinking.
Wow. All right, listen, what we're going to do now is going to take a brief break, and we're going to come right back, and we've got some other issues we're going to take a look at as far as the Trump administration and as far as Congress is concerned. So we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned, though. Come on back and hang in there, and you're going to have more of this wonderful conversation with Professor Joe Green and Dr. Chip Mcleod. So take it easy. I'll see you in just a couple minutes.
I want to say Guido, but that's not his name.
No.
That's Italian.
We can start right in about a couple, 30 seconds or what? 15 seconds?
Yeah, start.
You ready to go?
Go. Remind him I'm going to class halfway through.
Yep. You just excuse yourself for class. Here we go. Okay. You ready? And welcome back, everybody. This is Tips, Topics, Issues, and Positions. And we're going to continue on with our conversation. We have Professor Joe Green here and Dr. Chip Mcleod from Dixie State University. And we're talking about, continuing to talk about the Trump administration, some of the policies that have transpired. And what I'd like to do now is switch gears a little bit. We've talked about the world somewhat. I'd like to talk about China and the tariffs. Where are we at with that? We saw a big threat, tariffs with China, and then negotiations were opening up and things. Then he gave them an extension to the implementation of the tariffs. So any feedback from you on that? Any information at all? Anybody?
Nobody knows what's going on in the negotiations. There are kind of signs that they're getting to a point where maybe there's some sort of a deal that has been worked out. There was a big kind of semi-international incident because Trump walked away from the talks with North Korea that Xi Jinping, the president of China, was afraid that if he went to Mar-a-Lago, which he's scheduled to do soon, and they were supposed to sign a deal, that Trump might walk away and embarrass him. I don't know how that played out. I think the guy's going to Mar-a-Lago, but they're not planning on signing a deal yet. But they're still working it out. There's got to be, if what we're hearing is true, there's got to be, Mr. Trump wants a reduction in the trade deficit, and he also wants something done about the stealing of intellectual property. The irony is, when the United States economy does well, we buy lots of stuff, and even with the tariffs, the trade deficit with China just went up. But as you and I have talked before, I don't think the trade deficit is an issue worth considering. So
it is politically, because people think it means something. They think it means our economy is losing to a competitor, because unless you it really is, for folks out there who've been reading their history textbooks lately or whatever, it's an old mercantilist view where we got to sell people more stuff than we buy from them in order to maintain a healthy political entity and economy. And the modern economy is much more complex than that. That's something from
well, just in terms of logic, that cannot happen.
Right.
I mean, everybody can't sell more to the other country.
Right.
That's
and as Joe helps us understand repeatedly and consistently, there's a lot of good sound economic logic to the notion, if people will listen, that so we buy more stuff from China than they sell us. Last time I checked, we pay them with American dollars, and there are only two places to spend those. One's Belize, if you want to go there, and the other's United States of America. So that's a very important connection here.
Yeah.
The trade deficit is the goods, just the goods we buy from China compared to the goods they buy from us. It doesn't include services, and it especially doesn't include all the money that foreigners want to invest in stocks and bonds and real estate and other assets in the United States, because every dime that leaves comes back to buy that stuff.
Yep. And the Chinese know a lot about that. They've been actively involved with doing that.
If I'm a rich guy in China, given the way that their government's going now, I want to get my money out someplace safe, and so I want to buy assets in the United States. So if when their government, and they're going to, starts confiscating property and assets, that I've got someplace to go.
Yep, absolutely. And like I say, they've been doing that for years. I think we as Americans, that realization came to existence at the 2008 recession when it hit. We didn't realize how intertwined our world is with each other from a product standpoint, as well as investment, because of the Bank of America opened up and told us what a large percentage of investments were made from the People's Republic of China.
Gee, Bob, I thought you were going to go into why Deutsche Bank keeps lending Donald Trump money.
Well,
I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't mean to derail the show.
No, I'm just trying to lead right into that. That sounds, you know what, I'm going to bring that up, but we can do that right now. Because we're talking about the economic thing. Yeah, that $400 million you're talking about?
No. They throughout years gone by, before he was president, he was into them for millions and millions and perhaps billions of dollars. And when you start reading his, let's call it true financial biography, he doesn't pay his debts too faithfully. That's a matter of public record. And all I was going to suggest, at least for conversation, is that these are people who see the opportunity for some political influence. And why else would you keep lending money here in the Western world or anywhere to somebody who's a bad risk, basically? And again, people are talking about that, and I don't know how to get to the root of that matter, because once again, it takes me immediately to the place that this hasn't come up lately, but it's coming up now. Mr. Trump still doesn't want to reveal that tax return, and that's, to my way of thinking, there's got to be a reason, and without anything beyond speculation, to turn it into some sort of conspiratorial inquiry, and unless there's something damaging in that, he is at the end of a fairly long list of people since Richard Nixon who have all revealed their tax returns. So again, the question's back: why won't he tell us about that? But yeah, a lot of speculation as to what kind of end can we get with the United States of America if we keep lending this presidential hopeful money. It sounds like international business as usual. Other than that, I don't know. Who knows?
Okay.
I certainly don't, but I'm shocked, Chip. I'm shocked that you would imply that aspects of our government are corrupted by special interests. I'm just...
Professor Green, you're shocking me right now. You know this.
Who'd have thunk it?
Who'd have thunk it is right. I mean, well... How about let's go back over to our friends in North Korea.
Well put, Bob.
Okay. Well, I'm just working with the president here on this.
Yes.
Yeah. I know he loves me, and I love him.
It's a little stronger than friends, I think you said.
Well, yeah, use the big L word. So, anyway, my understanding is, and I need your comments on this, is that they thought they were going to have something together there when the last time they got together was it in North Vietnam? Or, not, I can't say Vietnam. Excuse me. Hanoi. And
it's still in northern
Vietnam.
Vietnam.
Thank you. I needed help on that.
It's northern Vietnam.
My history is showing here. So anyway, and things broke off. Nothing got accomplished, and they went back to their respective countries. And now all of a sudden we're seeing all of those quote-unquote denuclearization programs are on the shelf, and things are being reactivated, rebuilt, threats of possible ballistic missile testing being resumed. I thought the president indicated things were going well, going great. What's your feeling on all this? Do we look at it from a standpoint that he did it, the President Trump did us a favor when it was really a testy situation and it could have gone sour, and he intervened and got things calmed down? Or do we look at it like we're getting a lot of information from the president that's not very reliable, and that we're back to square one as far as ballistic missiles and with nuclear warheads and things of that sort from North Korea? Where do we go with this? What's happening here? What do you think?
Well, it's almost kind of a no-brainer. Of course, few things are more complicated than international diplomacy. And what people say and what people do and what they posture about are very often in different categories, and there's some rational connection. But what I think the president wanted everyone to take from this when he the way it's being described and still being described, got up and walked away, is that the notion was that the North Koreans were not complying. So until you do what you agreed to do, we're going to stop talking. Some people kind of liked that, and other people, I think, realized that it's not that simple. Negotiation is truly an art and a craft, and I don't know if he served us that well, but for people who like him because they think he's tough, I think they gave him an affirmative nod about that. But it's still a huge problem.
Sure is.
Yeah, when he came to office, they were shooting missiles across Japan and
yes,
testing underground every once in a while. And by agreeing to meet with him, they stopped doing that. So the tensions have been ratcheted down. But the negotiating position of the United States has always been, you destroy your nuclear program before we remove the sanctions. So Kim came to Hanoi and offered to blow up their nuclear reactor, Yongblang, something like that, if we remove most of the sanctions, the really hurtful ones. And Trump said, no, you've got to do it all, okay? So what's going on now is Kim decided this is going nowhere. No way I'm giving up my nuclear weapons. And that's what our intelligence agencies say. They testified before Congress before that meeting. Every one, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the CIA, National, the people who listen to us, listen to everything. Dan Coates, who's spokesman for him, said, North Korea is not giving up its nuclear. Wow. They're just not going to do it because that's what they think is the only thing that saves their regime from us undermining it. Okay? So maybe it was posturing to go to the meeting, see if they could get Trump to do what every other president who's dealt with this has done, which is we'll remove the sanctions and give you money, and you promise to get rid of something, and then you don't ever do it. So I don't know I don't know if it's posturing. I don't know if he's backed away. I don't think Trump and Pompeo know at this point.
Well, in the past, one of the most beneficial things for international politics and for people's kind of strange sense of peace of mind at home is that when people stop talking about these things on the surface, they go away. And that's what we've been able to accomplish in the past. Precisely as Joe just said, you do this, we'll do this, and we'll see how it goes. But again, Trump confronted him with the fact that this is what you agreed to do, and until you do it, we're going to maintain the sanctions, and beyond that, there's nothing to talk about. So I might as well leave. And but beyond that, no, it's monumentally unclear where that is, and I could only imagine in the deepest recesses of my imagination that he'd ever do that. Yeah. Because it is true that's the thinking there. That's all that stands between that regime and having it run over by the U.S. with the help of Japan and South Korea, and I think they believe that.
Yeah, I think so too. Their neighbor to the north, the People's Republic of China, I wonder how that's playing with the negotiations we talked about previously between China and the United States as far as the tariffs. I wonder if that piece is brought up when they're negotiating and talking, like if give and take, China would intervene again on behalf of what were desiring as far as they would want. Correct me if I'm wrong, but denuclearization in Korea, North Korea, would be great for the People's Republic of China. They're kind of nervous about that border because this unstableness. Does that make sense, or am I?
I'm not sure what China wants. They have they're the main source of energy and food for North Korea, and they participated in the sanctions when we had the aircraft carriers off of North Korea.
Right. You're right.
But evidently, they've backed. The word is they've backed off it a little bit since the prevailing wisdom for a long time was China liked the idea of North Korea being kind of like a burr in the United States saddle a little bit.
Okay.
They don't like the troops in South Korea. They don't like us there. They want the Western Pacific to be a Chinese lake, not a United States lake.
Right.
But if I go beyond that, I'm just speculating. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, that's another piece of the world.
That remains a huge challenge. I mean, with the U.S. presence there and the decided South Korean leaning toward the U.S. and again, you can't forget Japan. They would much prefer less U.S. influence in the region. We all know that.
And then along with that whole area, Japan, we're talking about the man-made islands being put together by the People's Republic of China also. So that with North Korea and the nervousness on the part of Japan and the declaration that China said that this is our territory because we built it, it's ours, and they do have military activities on those islands right now. And
they have air bases.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and those are operational.
That is boiling and bubbling, and one day, and I'm going to speculate now, the not too distant future, there's going to be at least some tension about that. We're watching that as carefully as we can, but nobody here is happy about that.
No.
The Chinese now have 2 aircraft carriers, which suggests that they're pushing their maritime footprint, and if they build that big enough, so they have carrier groups and transport ships, then they could invade Taiwan. We've guaranteed the sovereignty of Taiwan. That could be so. China's the main
and China
nemesis.
Wants that territory back. They want Taiwan back.
Yeah, it's their last province.
Yep, that's it. And then,
they need some more territory.
Yeah. Well, they've got 1.4 billion people. So
I've got to go, Bob, to my class.
Okay, Professor Joe Green, thank you very much for being here. He's leaving for class, and to the benefit of those wonderful students waiting for you in your classroom, I appreciate you taking your time and giving us all this information here today. Have a good class.
See you next time.
I'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Let me know if you schedule us again.
I will. Don't you worry. So,
having heard that, listeners can call in and request. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
Dr. Mcleod, I'm going to throw one last little bit at you just to wet the whistle for our listeners for the next time.
Sure.
We've got a thing called the upcoming election in 2020, and we've got. I think as of this morning, I think there's 12 Democratic candidates that are going to be running against President Trump.
Well, vying for the nomination.
At least vying for the nomination.
And if all 12 ran against him, we'd have to amend the Constitution.
Yeah, they're vying. That's right.
They could probably beat him together, but
just based on those that have announced and are tentatively like. We have a couple that are hanging on the fence saying, I'm not quite sure yet, but they're going to make that declaration. Is there anyone on that Democratic slate that you think has enough power that could overtake the incumbent, President Trump?
Well, Bob, first of all, I am not a bona fide card-carrying political junkie. One of the things that we grapple with in this country in terms of our political conversation. I don't know if anybody's thought about this recently, but with the 24-hour news cycle every time somebody, who wants to get in the race changes his shirt, her shirt, whatever, people want to know about that. What I'm really talking about is, as crucial as anything, is the philosophy developing in the Democratic Party. Do we want a candidate who is really going to weigh in and take Trump on, considering the way he's chosen to be president, of course, his policies, programs, the things that they want to change, fix, reform, or do differently, or what have you? Or is it just good enough because this is the way people are feeling, to make sure we have anybody who can beat him in the general election? Yeah. And of the people out there now, frankly, you ask, I'll tell you, we were talking about this off air as well. How important is it for the Democrats to put together a ticket that demonstrates diversity, whatever that means? What I hear people talking about is that we, one way or another, as Democrats, if you're with them, we need a woman on the ticket somewhere, in one slot or the other. Mm-hmm. There are people, Kamala Harris, of course, is getting some decent airplay and attention now. I don't know if what she's talking about in terms of programs, policies, and what have you, is doable in the United States of America. The Republicans will make great political hay of the fact that every time you can even hope to inject the notion of socialism in there, they're using it as a scare tactic. There are some very practical things that candidates are grappling with as well. And they're taking on the big ticket items as they challenge Trump, whether it's the wall, whether it's immigration policy, whether it's some kind of national system of health care. There is, I don't know whether Beto O'Rourke is going to keep going the way he's going. I'm not sure. I'm one of the people grappling with whether I truly believe, quite seriously, that Joe Biden is maybe getting a little too far up there in years to be president. I mean, he's a very bright, energetic, productive, fabulous guy, but the presidency of the United States is a very difficult job, and we're talking about a man who will, for all practical purposes, be looking down the barrel of 80 should he get elected when he's inaugurated. And I don't know what else he's going to have to say about that. But right now, what I'm saying to some extent is that these folks are very enthusiastically participating as they're going to get the primary season going and all that sort of thing. It's going to be very competitive. I'm not looking at anybody right now that I think has got what's required at this juncture to best Trump in the presidential election. And it's too soon to tell.
I understand.
I don't hear anybody saying anything that, again, it almost sounds trite, but I don't think it is, to say that you're going to have to give American voters something to vote for, not just this notion that we're going to put somebody in there, whatever that means, who can take him in a general election. What is it you're going to do that's different from what the Republicans are doing? And again, there are those hot button issues that people want solutions to, and that sort of thing. It's fun to some extent to watch them compete now. This is it's going to be a very emotional election, I think.
I think so too.
But and people really have their political hackles up. But these people have to forge something. They got to give the American voters a package that can compete with what the Republicans there are Republicans, and then there's Donald Trump. That's another show.
That's a whole nother show. That's right. That's right.
And because I don't know what he is. He's certainly not a classical Republican in any sense of our understanding of that political party. But I don't know. People are trying to get excited. They want to get excited if you're a Democrat, and that's good. That's the way our system works. But I don't see anybody who I would tap today and say clearly, run against Trump. You can take him in the election. It's really too soon to tell.
I understand. Well, guess what? We're out of time.
Uh-oh.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us in Tips. And Dr. Chip Mcleod, who's the chair of the Political Science and History Department here at Dixie State University, and Professor Joe Green, who had to leave to go teach a class. Stay tuned for next week, and we'd love to have your feedback on what do you think about the new format. Until then, this is Bob Oxley for Tips saying goodbye now.